Is the money you have in your bank account and the money you have in your pocket and the money you have in your house and the money you have in your investments your money? Or is it God's money? In other words, is that your money that you manage for you, or is that God's money that you are supposed to be managing for Him? Imagine what it would look like to manage the money under your control for God. That's what I want to talk about here. I want to share some stuff with you. May make you think, or at least consider things in a different way. You never have to agree with me. You can think I'm totally out there and crazy, but I want to share these thoughts with you, at least get you thinking about them. And stick around, because toward the end, I'm going to explain how 1,000 equals 100. So let's get into it. Is the money that you have under your control your money or God's money? And I think this is a big question that has to be answered up front, and we have to be sure and confident about the answer that we have and why we have that answer and came to that conclusion. So let me ask you this. Remember, God tells the story, the parable of the talents it's called. He gives one guy 5 talents, one guy 2 talents. The king, or the master does. Sorry, I can't come up with the word. The master gives one servant 5 talents, one servant 2 talents, one servant 1 talent. He goes away for a while. He expects them to manage. The master expects them to manage his money the way he wants it managed. He comes back. The guy with the 5 talents comes to him and says, "Hey, I took your 5 talents. I invested it. I worked with it. I did da-da-da-da-da. And I turned your 5 talents into 10 talents. And the master says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. I'll put you over more things." Then he has the guy with the 2 talents come in, and the guy with the 2 talents says, "Hey, I took your 2 talents and I did some stuff with it. I invested it. I did da-da-da-da-da. And I turned your 2 talents into 4 talents. And the master says, "Hey, that's great. Well done, good and faithful servant. I'll put you over more stuff." And the guy with the 1 talent comes in and says, "I was afraid that you would get mad if I lost it, so I didn't do anything with it. I just buried it in the ground. Nothing happened to it. Here's your 1 talent back." And what does the master say? He doesn't say, "Hey, that's okay. Don't worry about it." He says, "You wicked servant." And he sends him out to where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. And he takes the 1 talent and gives it to the guy that turned the 5 into 10 talents. God says in 1 Corinthians 4:7, He goes, "Why do you brag about all this stuff that you think you have and all the stuff you think you've done? You don't have anything that I didn't give you. Oh, you think you worked really hard to make that happen? Well, you have the talents to be able to do that because I gave them to you." Or you say, "You worked really hard to develop those talents," and God is saying, "Yeah, that's great, but you know what? I gave you the motivation and drive to make those talents even better. And oh, by the way, the talents that you had to start with, I gave you those also. So quit acting like you've done something great. I've done it. All that you have, I gave to you." And then God goes on and He says, "Hey, you think you're giving stuff to me?" He goes, "You can't give me anything because I already own it all." He says that in Romans, I think it's 14. He says, "I already own it all. You can't give me anything. It's already mine to start with." And I like to give this example to maybe make it more concrete for us. Let's say you have some money invested with an investment advisor at a bank. And you go to get your money out. Let's say it's $100,000. And either the person managing the money at the bank or the investment advisor says, "Hey, you want your money? That's great. I know you had $100,000 invested with me. Here's 10,000 of it, 10%. Now with the other 90,000, look, let me show you a picture. Here's the new boat I bought. Our family had such a great vacation in Florida on this new boat. We bought this new car for my wife. Let me show you this. Oh man, it is really, really nice." What are you going to say? "Oh man, that's awesome. You took my money and used it for you. That's great. I'm so happy." Or are you going to say, "Wait a minute. I gave you my money and I gave you instructions on what to do and how to manage my money, and you didn't follow it"? I think that's where you're going to fall. I think that's where I would fall. So I think the question that really needs to be answered is, how does God want you? How does God want me? How does God want us to manage His resources? In this case, we're talking specifically about money. How does God want us to manage His money? And before we get to that, I want to tell you about something that I have going on right now, and I think it'll help you with this, coming up with how does God want me to manage my money, because it's not really my money to start with, and I'm calling it the North Star Challenge. Now let me explain briefly, and then we'll get right back to it, to the topic. Briefly, what that is, I have found having what I call a North Star for my life, or an overarching vision or purpose for my life, that's up here, okay? That has been so helpful, because then I know what my purpose in life is, I know what the vision for my life is, and I can orient and arrange my entire life around reaching and achieving that purpose or vision. And so what I want to do is offer men, sorry ladies, this is just for men the opportunity to do this. And what it'll be is it's 5 days, and it's just you and I, one-on-one for 5 days. And what we're going to do is, at the end of those 5 days, you will have worked through a process with me. It'll be fun. We'll just work through this together, and you will come out of there with a North Star, or a vision, or an overarching purpose for your life for the next 12 months. Not for the rest of your life. People, I think, find that intimidating, but just for the next 12 months. And so there is a cost. It's $20, but wait, it's not, the money doesn't come to me. In the show notes, it explains how this works. But there are 3 really great nonprofit organizations. I support them all. You donate $20 to one of those, take a screenshot of the donation, send it to me either on the phone or the email down there in the show notes. Let me see that you did it. I'll contact you and we'll get started. Okay, so that's having an overarching vision, which I think will help you with this whole how you manage your money thing. Back to the question. How does God want you to manage his money for him? A couple of things I want you to think about. If you look at the Bible from Genesis 1 to Revelation 22, in other words, from the first word of the Bible to the last word of the Bible, you're going to find an overarching theme that runs through that, a thread that ties all these strange seeming stories together that don't seem interconnected many times. And that theme is, from Genesis 1 to Revelation 22, God's heart is to make his name great and his salvation known amongst all groups of people in the world, so that there will be people from every group of people in the world around the throne in heaven worshiping God forever and ever. That's God's heart. And so my proposition to you is, if that's God's heart, then shouldn't we be managing his money that he's entrusted to us in a way that is supporting God's heart, which is reaching every ethnic group of people on this earth with the message and story of Jesus Christ? 3 billion people in the world right now who, in all probability, will be born, live, and die, never having access to have the opportunity to even hear about Jesus and Jesus's message and to make a decision on that. Now, here's some numbers I want you to think about. Many, many ministries in the world right now are trying to work in certain areas of these 3 billion people, but there's just not enough of these ministries working to really make an impact on the 3 billion total. Okay? It costs, if you sum up all the amount of money spent on those ministries versus the number of people that are becoming followers of Jesus, it works out to the cost is about, well, it's actually a little less, but I'm just going to round off, $10 per new believer to reach those people. So think about this. You are managing God's money. For every $1,000 of God's money that you spend on your lifestyle or buying all the things that you think you want and need and deserve, for every $1,000 that you spend of God's money toward your lifestyle, you are saying 100 people will die never hearing the message of Jesus. And before you say, well, they're good to go anyway if they didn't hear, just remember, if you're saying there is another way to get into the kingdom of God and access to the Father than through Jesus, then why did Jesus have to come and do what he did in the first place if there's another way? So I think that's a very real, tangible way to look at it. For every $1,000 of God's money that I'm managing for Him that I spend on my lifestyle, I am saying I don't want 100 of these 3 billion people to be reached with the message of the gospel of Jesus and become followers of Jesus. That's just a little filter to run it through. So what are the practical steps we do here now? Because we have money that we are managing for God, and God says, He does promise, if we put His kingdom first, His heart first, then He will provide for our needs. So how do you know how much of God's money that you're managing for Him that you spend on your lifestyle, and how much should go toward reaching and completing the Great Commission, which is God's a brief summary of God's heart from Genesis to Revelation? That is an excellent question that I wish we would get more help with in the Christian community. So I'm going to offer you a couple of things to do here. One is, down in the show notes, there's a link. It's called The Story G to R. And it's an article that I wrote for Medium, and it's on there, and I'll tell you, it says it's a 28-minute read, so it's going to take a little bit, so get you a cup of coffee or something to snack on and read it. But it walks you through, starting in Genesis 1, all the way through the end of Revelation, and it shows you this common thread laying out how this is God's heart that we just talked about to reach every ethnic group of people in the world. You read that, and then sit down with Jesus, keeping in mind the filter of $1,000 on your lifestyle means you're sacrificing 100 people to not have the opportunity to hear about Jesus' story and His message and become followers. And sit down with Jesus with no pressure, just to listen to Jesus, and with His help, create your budget with the resources that you are managing for Him. And I'll tell you what it's done for me when I did that. It gave me such peace to know that I am managing my money the way Jesus wants. And it took a lot of stress away with the decisions that I should be making with money. Hey, if you like this video, would you consider liking it? Would you consider sharing it with someone if you found this beneficial? Maybe even subscribing? And if you liked it, maybe make a comment down here in what you found most useful, or other ways I could help you with this, or questions you may have. And also, if you think I'm completely off my rocker and crazy, make that same comment down here. I never take that personal, and it won't be the first time I've called crazy and radical or whatever. But I would appreciate any feedback so I can make better videos that would be more helpful to you and others in the future.